Hello and welcome to another webinar from Writing at the Edge, and coming to you today from the glorious library at the Plymouth Athenaeum. Now, we're Writing at the Edge and we try and push authors to the edge and beyond to help them to improve their writing, to challenge them to be the best that they possibly can be. Today, we're diving into that ever dreaded topic of writer's block. And with me is William Telford, and he's our MA in creative writing. So welcome, William.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm pleased to be here and ready to talk about one of the most frustrating things that any writer can face, and that is writer's block.
At the end of the half hour, we'll be letting you know how to get hold of our writer's block cheat sheet. So do please stick around for that. It will be an invaluable aid to helping you beat the block. Definitely one to have by your writing desk. And if you're watching on catch up, well, the offer should still be valid. Okay, let's dive right in. For those who might not know, William Telford, what exactly is writer's block?
Well, I'm going to quote you something here. The Royal Literary Fund, I had to look this up. They've been around for over 2 centuries, helping writers since 1790, actually. They defined writer's block as a temporary or lasting failure to put words on paper. And these days, I think we'd also include various screens and tech.
Yeah, well, that's true, because we've come a long way since quills and ink. So they say it's essentially not being able to write.
Yeah, I think it's more than that. That it's to clarify. It affects writers for what could be some short periods or even a lasting period. If it goes on for a long time, I think you're really in trouble if it drags on. That can stop writers hitting targets, or worse, it can make them completely incapable of actually finishing a project.
Oh, blimey, that sounds terrifying. But is it just about not being able to write anything at all?
Well, I don't think necessarily it is. No, I'd argue it's more than just. Some writers can't sit down and write; they just can't write anything. But I think it's more than just that, sitting staring at a blank page. It's when
or a blank screen.
Or a blank screen these days. Yeah, indeed. It's when your writing can also feel flat. It's missing that vital spark. You might be writing something, but it's not coming alive. It just doesn't sing. It's like your work needs some literary CPR. Really.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Literary CPR. That's great. But interestingly, some writers, even some well-known ones, they say that writer's block doesn't actually exist. Is that true, or how does that work?
That's correct. There's a lot of writers who don't believe in writer's block. I mean, Philip Pullman, he said that plumbers don't get plumber's block and doctors don't get doctor's block. So why should writers get writer's block? And he sees it. Many of them see it more as a discipline issue rather than a creative issue.
Okay, I might challenge that. I think it's not beyond imagination to have a doctor say he or she doesn't actually know what's wrong with a patient, and then that's why they refer them up to specialists. But hey, I take your point. And are there others with the same view as Philip Pullman?
There's a lot who don't really buy into the writer's block thing. Norman Mailer, Pulitzer Prize winner, he called it a failure of the ego. Again to the creativity thing there. Oberon Waugh, he's probably better known for his humorous writing in Private Eye and that than his novels. I mean, he chalked it up to laziness. He said it was just plain not having anything to say. And Jerry Seinfeld, the American comic and comedian writer, he was really harsh. He actually used a bad word, which I won't say, but I'll paraphrase it. And he called it a phony excuse for not doing your work.
Oh, ow, that's a tough one. Yeah. So with such opposing opinions, does writer's block, in your opinion, William Telford, does writer's block actually exist then?
Well, there's definitely writers who say they have it. And there's definitely cases of writers who say they can't finish or even start another project because of it. And there's very many famous ones who, who said that they did suffer from writer's block. For every Philip Pullman and Jerry Seinfeld, there's And F. Scott Fitzgerald, he suffered from it. Tom Wolfe suffered from it. Douglas Adams of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy famously suffered from it, even though he wrote a lot of
Yeah.
scripts
Yeah,
and a lot
yeah,
of books. But he often was interviewed during his lifetime saying he had it. Harper Lee and Ralph Ellison are both supposed to be cases of it. They actually only published one book one novel each in their lifetime. So maybe that was a clue to how much they suffered from it.
Okay, so what's your take on it then?
Well, I see it. Somebody once said journalists don't get writer's block, writers do, which is interesting. But so I think it's definitely a paralysis. I see it more a creative block than actually not being able to write. I mean, there actually are physical illnesses where people can't physically write.
Okay.
The writer's cramp is one. It affects your hands. It's serious, you can't type.
Okay.
But there's also a mental one where
Okay,
people
yes.
can't see words on a page. But what we're talking about here is a creative block, a failure of the imagination when ideas just stop flowing. So the question is, if you've got a stagnation like that, what's causing it? And can you get over it? Can you get through that?
Good point. Let's talk about the causes then. So what do you think typically leads to writer's block? And I know you've mentioned sort of creative paralysis, but what actually do you think leads to it?
Well, if you look at it, the term writer's block was actually only coined in 1947 by it would be Austrian, wouldn't he? Psychiatrist, he would be Austrian, called Dr. Edmund Bergler. And he was a Freudian, so it was in that great era when there was lots of psychiatry coming out of Austria, and he identified it. Before that, there was no term. It's not to say that writers didn't suffer from it, but they never called it writer's block before that. And he attributed it to, being a Freudian, of course, to something called oral masochism, which I'm still not sure what it is. I'm not a psychiatrist, and even not being breastfed as a baby.
Wow, that is no, come on, that is taking it a bit far, isn't it?
Well, he was a psychiatrist, so,
and
Freudian. But so let's not, we're against Freudian analysis, but there are lots of causes, and there's a lot of medical causes that people have looked at, things like stress, panic, mental health issues, for instance, depression, anxiety, financial worries, and even, like I say, physical illnesses. All these things can stop you writing. But, those they go into the realms of medical science and not just into what we can help you with as writers.
Okay, but that does make sense.
Yeah.
But then, what's something more within the writer's control?
Well, I mean, one thing that's not a medical thing, but I think that is always a good idea for writers is tiredness.
Okay.
Don't write when you're tired and exhausted. For creativity, you have a fresh mind. I mean, there's exceptions. The science fiction writer Philip K. Dick, he was well known for writing sometimes up to 150 pages in one night, and he would, in late night sessions, and he published a whole book that was written apparently at night. But Philip K. Dick was quite an unusual person, lived a quite an unusual lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I would say he's an exception that proves the rule. For most people, I feel, writing when you're mentally and physically fresh is really key.
So no late night caffeine fueled writing sessions for the rest of us then.
No. I think if some people some writers were forced into that either by their personality or by the sheer demands of having things to hit a deadline, which we get to later. But I would say write when you're fresh, and also I always try to write in the morning, but write when you're fresh. Another one is blamed a lot is procrastination. We've all heard from young students, I was going to write my novel, but I got caught up in a Call of Duty marathon. It's more about distractions than actual laziness.
No, I can agree with that. And I used to say that when I was running teams. It's all very well saying that my report hasn't been written, but hey, I got all my emails filed. Not quite where we need to be. No, I totally get that. Okay. So we've covered all the causes. Now let's talk about solutions. What can a writer do to beat the block?
I'm a great fan of just sitting down and writing. And I said, it's a creative block and not everything is going to be good, but just get going, and
Yeah.
then hopefully something it will kickstart, it'll fire, the
Mhm.
spark plug will go. There's a famous quote. I was like, I think I'm pretty sure it was Mark Twain. My rule of thumb is if you're not sure who quoted
It's
anything about
usually
writing,
Mark Twain.
it's usually Mark Twain.
Yes.
But he said the hardest part of writing is the application of the seat of the pants to the seat of the chair.
Right.
And it's again, like we said about procrastination, is, I've got something more important to do. He said, sit down and get started. And it's like, that doesn't matter what comes out, but just start working.
Yeah.
Hemingway said he said, writing, there's nothing to it. You sit at a typewriter and bleed,
Yeah.
or today at a computer screen.
Yeah,
and bleed.
yeah.
You just get it out.
And as you say, even if it's bad at first, just getting something down on the pages. I think it was Stephen King who said it's always possible to edit a written page. It's not possible to edit a blank page. So yeah, absolutely, get started. But ultimately, easier said than done. Is that where you would say on this?
I'd agree with him. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just get started, get the words out. A friend of mine who'd written a novel, he called it The Vomit. He was a Canadian.
Oh, okay.
The Vomit.
Lovely.
And he said, just get it all out, and you can clean it up later.
Yes.
And I thought that was a nice way of saying it.
I agree with that, and that makes real sense. I call it colouring in. So what I do is I write I just sort of go, what happened? What's because I write action stories. So what happens? This happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. And then I go back and colour in, which is, how did the characters feel about this? Particularly the point of view character, obviously, because I don't do head hopping. What does the character actually feel about that action? And then what does it mean to them? And then how does it sort of link back to maybe something in their past? So I just literally just get the sort of the bones of the sequence, the scene down, and then
writing a précis first,
yeah,
and then
absolutely,
adding the detail.
Absolutely,
yeah,
and it's easy to do that because you can just go, right, what do I need to happen in this scene? Well, that happens, and that happens. Okay, great. Now I can go back and, as I say, what I call it is colouring in. Okay, but what if somebody's still stuck?
Well, I think routine is a good thing, and like I said, when you're fresh, it's always best. I mean, for me, I'd do a lot of writing early in the morning, partly because I'd do it before work, but get up, start at like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, do half an hour. Your mind is fresh, you feel good. And also, I found sometimes the problem you're wrestling with in your story that the night before thinks, I can't get that to work, is suddenly kind of like fixed.
Yeah.
When you sit there and you go,
no, I agree with
of course, that's what is going to happen next. And also, as the day goes on, by afternoon, I don't know, maybe it's age, but once I hit about 2 PM, I just want to have a nap. So start when you're fresh. If you're a student and you get up at 2 PM, that's your fresh time. Before countdown comes on, and start then.
Other cliches are available.
But start then. But also, routine. Having a set routine, have a time of day. Somebody said to me, right, if you're going to get up and write at 6 AM, write at 6 AM every day. And do it for half an hour, an hour. Your brain, you get trained into it. Your brain gets trained into it at that time of day.
Well, for me, it's about going out for a walk. If I can't think of how this scene is going to progress, by the time I've come back from the walk, I've got it. It's right there, and that really works for me.
It worked for Dickens.
Yeah,
he used to walk around London at night.
Oh yeah, well,
let's have a walk around. And all his
that was his story, wasn't it?
It was very dangerous in those days.
Exactly.
As well.
Yes.
But he did. He used to go out for night walks and come back and have an idea.
Okay. So, what about research for inspiration? How does that work?
I think, that's the other thing. If you're stuck, do a bit of reading. Read something, and that might unclog things and get things going. Or especially if you're writing genre. I know you like historical fiction. Research, look into something of that period. That would give me an idea.
Absolutely.
My favourite band are the Clash, and Joe Strummer. He said that we once said in a quote, to have output, you must have input. And he was talking about songwriting. But it's the same principle. You've got to take in other people's creativity, and it gives you a kickstart.
And Writing at the Edge is the only writing webinar where you're going to have the Clash and Joe Strummer used as a reference, but hey. Okay, so it makes sense. And if somebody who's feeling totally stuck, what do you then recommend?
Well, there's a lot of things you can do. Another friend of mine, a different writer, she suggested something called clustering. It's not something I've done.
No.
And again, she writes in genre, so it might work better in genre. But she says like brainstorming or free associating.
Mind mapping.
Yeah, you just get words down. So you start with things you want to put in there. So, murder psychiatrist, and then see what comes from that, and then write other things, or,
Yeah, absolutely.
falls in love.
Yeah.
Where, in a shop, meets in a shop, walks down the street,
Yeah.
two dogs,
Yeah.
two dog walkers in a
and
park.
you're right. It's just that
sort
free
of thing.
association.
Put things down and then try and,
Yeah.
and then what's the next idea? And then it's almost like creating a list,
Mhm.
a bit like your précis, but only random kind of things, I think is what the idea was there. Well, the other thing is, and, James Patterson, the thriller writer, who's written loads of books, he said that he gets past writer's block by having more than one project on the go at once.
Right.
So switching gears, I think he called it, multiple projects. So he's working on a novel, but he's got like a backup novel and something else as well. And then if it's just not going, he goes, right, I'll just switch.
Mhm.
I'll start looking at this one, forget that one, move on to something else, or perhaps start something new. So, multiple things, that are going at once is a good idea.
Okay. Well, I love the idea of having a backup project. I mean, that sounds great. Keeps things moving. Can I just add maybe my top 10 tips?
Yeah,
I've got a few that I wanted to throw in the mix
Let's
here.
go for that.
So one is change your environment. Shift your writing location, try a park or a cafe or a different room. I mean, sometimes when I'm working in my little office, I'll go and sit on the sofa with my laptop, and that's a good way to sort of just refresh things up a bit. A new environment can really stimulate creativity and sort of give you fresh inspiration. So that's one.
I like the idea of the cafe.
Yeah,
You're
cafes
seeing
is
people
good.
going past.
Yeah.
As well, they might give you an idea.
Gives ideas. And also with a cafe, what I find, and also with an office, is that because there's bustle and noise going on around you, it sort of tends to force you to focus on your own work. And whereas if you're just sitting in the quiet on your own, you can then just, your mind wanders and you look at the flat and you think, oh, it just needs a bit of a clean. I'll just do that quickly. Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Writers tend to have very clean environments, but maybe it's just me. Take a break. Take a short, intentional break by doing something relaxing. And we've mentioned going for a walk or going for a run or stretching. Physical activity can really release the mental tension and reset your brain. So that's number 2. Number 3, and we've talked about this actually, is write something else, something entirely different. But it doesn't have to be a second project. It could be like a journal entry or a short poem or something that keeps the mind active, keeps it writing while you're sort of moved away from the primary project, and it reduces the pressure. Set small, achievable goals. Break down your writing into manageable tasks, like maybe writing 100 words or finishing one paragraph. Just give yourself that, that little target. I'm going to finish this paragraph, and then small victories build momentum and sort of make the writing experience less overwhelming.
It's a bit like when we said start at 6 a.m. and write for just half an hour every day.
Yeah.
But you could do it in like a quantifiable number of words.
Yeah.
I will write 100 words.
And there are a lot of people who say, I'm going to write so many words a day, and they don't
I remember
stop.
hearing one author being interviewed who said she just wrote a page a day.
Yeah.
But at least she got a page done.
Yeah.
At the end of the week, you got 7 pages.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Although I write in Scrivener, so it's hard to see where that page ends. But I agree with that. Use prompts or exercises. So creative writing prompts to inspire new ideas. Prompts push your brain in new directions, breaking the sort of loop of stuck ideas. Now, I'm going to challenge, because I know that our next webinar is about AI. And I'm going to challenge those who say AI is not a force for good. I think there are some very good uses for AI, and I will explain what I mean by that. An AI program, if you ask it a plot device question, it can come back with some great ideas. Now, you don't just write what it gives you. You don't just copy and paste, but you look at the idea and you think, how can I make that idea work? And all of a sudden, you've broken that writer's block. So with my project at the moment, my book, I said to a certain AI program, I've got a plot problem. I gave it sort of the setup and then said, what would my character do? And it came back with a few ideas, one of which I thought, that's exactly what they would do. And then, obviously I didn't use what it said. I just then said, okay, I've got the idea, and off I went again, and everything was great. So that really does work. It may not be directly applicable, but it's very likely to spark a great idea of your own. So I would certainly recommend using it for that.
Prompts are a good thing generally, because in creative writing courses, they often use prompts. It can be a picture,
Yeah,
write to a
yeah.
picture, or it can be a quote,
yes,
or it can be. I did one once where everyone in the class was asked to put in a different idea. So one did a character, one did a setting, one did a time period,
yeah.
one did a conflict,
Yeah,
and you didn't necessarily have to write exactly to all that, but it was to give you an idea, something to spark you off,
yeah. No, that really works. Seek feedback or collaboration. Share your writing with a friend or a mentor or a critique group. Fresh perspectives give you new ideas and help you unblock your creative flow. And actually, it's been really interesting because my critique group now knows my characters better than I do. And they're very happy to tell me that my character wouldn't do that. So, yeah, that's been very interesting.
I would say, yeah, writing groups, open mic nights,
Yes.
these things, they're a good way. Meeting other people who will give you ideas, but also running your ideas past people.
Yep.
But also, for me, I go to a lot of these things. They give you a deadline. I like to have something
Yes,
new
that's true.
to try out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've got to do something by Thursday. I've got to write something. Yeah.
Now, we've talked earlier on about avoidance techniques, and actually, sometimes if you've really got a block, an avoidance technique is not a bad way to clear the block. So spending some time drawing, cooking, gardening, sewing, playing music, anything that's not writing, but hopefully creative, then that can spark some creativity and give you ideas. So that's good. I mean, listening to music is also really useful. I had a creative block not long ago, and I put a song on, and there was a line in the lyric that made me think, oh, that's the answer, I've got it. And off I went. So that was good. Visualize the scene or the story. Close your eyes and imagine your scene or your topic. Imagine it vividly. What is happening? Picture the setting, the characters, all the main points without actually, without actually writing anything down. Then engaging your mind in that sort of non-verbal way stimulates the creativity and allows ideas to flow naturally when you return to your writing. So that's good. And then my 10th tip is talk it out. Explain what you're trying to write to a friend, a family member, although I'd be a little bit cautious about that because they can be your harshest critics, or even to yourself. And this is quite good, to yourself out loud. Verbalizing your thoughts can clarify the complex ideas and can really sort of help you discover new ways to approach your writing. So those are my tips. Have you got any more?
Well, there's lots more. Deadlines. We mentioned deadlines briefly. Set a deadline. I tend to set deadlines for there's an event coming up. I want to have something new to read at this workshop or at this open mic. So I'll write something by the end of the week, But you could do things like, I'll write 500 words in half an hour. I've been to things where they've said to some workshops where they've gone, right, we're all going to stop now, and in 5 minutes, just write something.
Yeah.
It can be just, even if it's a sentence, just get something written.
Yeah.
So deadlines, they force you to focus, and they can, stop you overthinking and procrastinate, because again, you've got to write something quick.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best ideas come out of you haven't overthought
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Reordering your content. If you're stuck in a part, go to a different part of it, rearrange your outline, changing sequences, adding in some new ideas, but basically rewriting. Some people have said writing is rewriting. If the piece if we go back to James Patterson, the piece you're doing isn't working, maybe go back to that previous thing that you finished, but you're not quite happy with. Go through it and just do a bit of rewriting.
Yeah, find the fork in the road where you went off in one direction, but actually you could have gone in a different direction. And if you then just change that one little thing, but be careful, because changing one little thing happened to me recently. I changed one thing, 3 chapters had to be rewritten. But they were. So that's good. Okay.
Well, they might be improved chapters. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Some people like a thing called writing sprint.
Yes.
So you just say, 5-10 minutes, write as much as you can, anything, just again, but it's like that getting started, write it and see what comes out of that.
Yeah.
You know, and again, time constraints, they force you to write quickly.
Mhm.
You won't overanalyze, you won't get, you know, sort of overthink things, and, you know, you can always re-edit it later. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
exactly that. Okay, well, this, I mean, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much. Do you have any final tips? Final tips for any of our
Well,
listeners
is
who are, or viewers,
I
struggling with
do.
writer's block? Yes.
I do. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Something I do a lot, which is stealing. Now, by that I don't mean copying or plagiarising.
No, absolutely
But
not. We do not recommend plagiarising.
No.
Just want to say that.
Take inspiration from other writers,
Yes.
but from other works. So, you know, a lot of famous people have done this. Zadie Smith, J.M. Coetzee, James Joyce, Ulysses
Yeah.
is the Odyssey rewritten. It's not the same thing. You're not copying it, but you're taking maybe the structure or the basic idea and you're developing it. You're doing it in your own voice, and you're doing it. You know, I'll do it sometimes. If I want to just get started, I'll maybe read a short bit of flash fiction or something. So,
Yeah.
could I write that story in my way?
Mm-hmm.
Could I make like a sad story funny, for instance? Yeah, things like that. You don't always want to go on with these, but they give you an idea, get you started. I've also tried writing things in the style of another author. So I've read a bit of somebody's book and thought, well, could I write something in that style? And you don't intend to ever publish it.
No, but it's just a writing exercise.
But it's give you an idea, and sometimes you think, oh yeah, that gives me an idea of doing something different, or maybe a voice of a character or something like that. And lots of people have borrowed, as we've said. I mean, Shakespeare was always borrowing. I mean, he was writing about real life, so real life stories and real life characters. Loads of novels written about things that really happened.
Yeah.
But we mentioned songs earlier. You know, you can get ideas from songs.
Yeah.
There were songs. T. Karasin Boyle, I'm probably saying his name wrong. He wrote an entire short story based on a line in a Bruce Springsteen song.
Okay. Sounds good.
He took the word. Springsteen wrote about going up to Greasy Lake, and he just imagined what happened when they got to Greasy Lake, and wrote a whole
and what is Greasy
story
Lake?
about this place called Grease, this lake, this rundown lake full of pollution or whatever. And you get these sort of guys who go up there and start a fight, basically. And that all came out of that, and he even attributed it. He said, "You know, I got the idea from Springsteen's song."
Attributing is right, and just on that point, as a historical fiction writer, I have my characters interact with real events, so they're in the background of a real event, or they're there for a particular reason, and so I can actually describe that real event. But sometimes I have to move dates. Otherwise, you can't just put the character here and then have to wait a couple of years before you can then put them there. So I truncate and I move dates. But like you were saying about attributing, I then have an author's note which says, yes, I know this took place 2 years later, but I had to move it because, and then at least you're being honest and open about it.
Another great thing to steal from is obituaries.
Right.
A friend of mine, an author, he always read the obituaries in the broadsheets.
Right.
They write about not always the famous people, but notable people, not to copy, but to get ideas of people's lives. And when you read them, a lot of people have had incredible real lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, well, you know, the film out at the moment, isn't The Brutalist? Isn't that about a real architect's life? You know, so you can actually write about a real person, or you can just take that as inspiration to write about a character in that time.
And even if it's not your character in your story, just understanding people's stories can help you find that little spark which sets off the clears the block and allows you to write your next scene or your next character development. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not copying or plagiarizing, because what is the creative bit is what you put into it. It's your creativity. So when you put yourself into it, into your writing, your voice into it, that's what changes it and makes it different. So there's nothing wrong with borrowing, you know, a little bit of a creative spark. Yeah.
Or, and now here's a thought, even something you disagree with. So, you know, reading an article or a book or something with viewpoints that actually challenge your ideas. Engaging with a sort of an opposing perspective can really provoke some thought about a fresh angle or an argument for your writing, and it could maybe give you where your antagonist is coming from. Or if it's your protagonist who's maybe coming from a different place, then you can think about, well, what's giving them their motivation. So something which actually challenges your normal sort of perception could be quite useful.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely can agree with that. Yes.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of the webinar. So thank you very much indeed for being here with us today, William.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
And always happy to share the highs and lows of our writing life. Yeah. So here's some information about our next webinar, and it will be broadcast on Thursday, the 3rd of April, 2025, and it's called "Can a Machine Do Your Job?" Keith and Jason will be discussing this and asking, is AI here to stay? And how should you use it in your writing? Now, we've talked a little bit about using it maybe to beat writer's block, as to suggest plot directions, but they will ask the question, should you even be using it at all? So let's see what they say. That's Thursday, the April the 3rd at 8 p.m. GMT. And is it GMT by then? No, I think it's BST by then, isn't it? So it'll be Thursday, the 3rd of April, 8 p.m. BST. And do please tune in for that. And the ticket link is on the screen right now.
Well, yeah, it looks fascinating, that one. I'll definitely be watching that.
And finally, a quick word about our partner. Now, Writing at the Edge is partnered with Winter and Drew Publishing. Now, this aims to bring together the best of self-publishing combined with the best of traditional publishing. So the question is, and this is where sort of Winter and Drew is coming from, should you submit queries to agents and go down the traditional publishing route, or should you go down the self-publishing route? Now, with Winter and Drew's innovative hybrid publishing approach, down the middle, you can have the best of both worlds, and you can find out more on the website, which is on screen now.
Right, and so as a final thought, we've discussed some very good tips in this webinar, Jonathan. What about the viewers? How can they get hold of them?
Yes, we have our cheat sheet, which distills all the ideas we've discussed and can be downloaded for free. The link is on the screen now. And there's also a blog on this subject, which is well worth a read, and the link for that is also on the screen. So, thanks everyone for watching, and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.